Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Santa Barbara Design Standards Work Group. Really appreciate that you're all here. So before we go ahead and get started on the agenda, I'm just going to do a quick roll call of the work group members, so you can just unmute when I call your name and let me know you're here. So I'll start with David Black.
Here.
Dennis Jordan.
I'm here.
Cass Ensberg.
I'm here.
Gabe Escovedo. I see you. I think you're muted. Okay. Robert Uli. Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, here. Thank you.
Okay.
Robert's here.
Okay, and I do know that Deddy Pikert can't make it today, so finally Richard Six.
Here.
Great. Well, again, thank you for coming. So we can go to the next slide, please. So first I'll just go over our agenda for today. So we're gonna start with some introductions, and I'll be describing the purpose of the project and the role of the work group. We'll go over the entire project and schedule overview, and then we'll hand it over to our consultant team at Opticos Design, and they'll be talking a little bit more about the work group meetings. We'll look at some examples of objective design standards. We will identify our date for the next work group meeting in November, and we do have opportunity for the public to comment at the end. We'll put aside a little time, 10 or 15 minutes for that. I don't think I have any members of the public attending at this point, but we'll see how it goes, and then we'll adjourn. Next slide. All right, so, we don't all know each other here, so I wanted to start and spend a few minutes on introductions. So I'll just be calling on people one by one to sort of introduce themselves. I'll start with city staff. I think I'll go to Opticos next, and then our work group members. And I'd like the work group members to spend a minute or so to describe, your relationship with the city and why you volunteered to be on this work group and what do you hope to get out of this project. So I'll start with myself. I'm Rosie Deisty. I'm a project planner with the city in long range planning. I've been with the city almost going on 7 years now. And I'm also managing this project. I'm coming right off the heels of a similar effort that we worked on, and some of these work group members are very familiar with this project to create our first sort of specific objective design standards for the city based on Senate Bill 35 that offers a sort of streamlined ministerial approval process for very certain types of multi-unit projects. And that process took about a year. It was very, very challenging, but now I'm really looking forward to this next phase in this grant funded project where we have a little bit more time. We have a consultant to help us out, and really looking forward to a great result. So I'll hand it over to Dan next to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Dan Gullett. I'm principal planner in long range planning. I've been with the city now for 14 and a half years, and Santa Barbara almost 20. I'm very interested in design, especially urban design. I was in transportation planning for a while too, so I'm very interested in the public realm as well, and I'm really curious how all this goes and happy to support this effort. Thanks.
And sorry, before I ask the next person, I wanted to mention that Tava Ostranger and Jessica Metzger are absent today. So the next person will be Timmy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a project planner in long range planning. Been working for the city for almost 9 years now. Do a lot of data mapping and analysis type work. I'll be supporting Rosie through this effort, and I'm really excited to learn from the great brain trust of Santa Barbara who's helping us out with this. So thank you.
Thanks, Timmy. Okay, so next to Opticos, Stefan. And you can unmute yourself if.
Thanks, Rosie. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stefan Pellegrini. I'm a principal with Opticos Design. Our office is located in Berkeley, and I'm an architect, an urban designer, and a planner. And I'm really looking forward to getting this project kicked off with all of you.
Thank you. And Tony?
Good morning. I'm Tony Perez with Opticos Design, and I'm an urban designer and former public sector planner. I've been working for Opticos Design for about 9 years now, and I'm the project manager. Good to meet you.
Okay, Singe?
Hello, everyone. I'm Singe Saliki, and I'm a senior designer here at Opticos, and I'm working on this project along with the team.
Great. And finally, Beth?
And hello, I'm actually in the same office as Singe right now with Opticos Design, and I've worked here for 3 years on a variety of projects. And I've been focusing on objective design for the last year or so very excited.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'll just go in the order that we have here on the list. So David Black.
Good morning. I'm a landscape architect by training. I'm currently a member of the Architectural Board of Review. Many moons ago, I was on the Historic Landmarks Commission for 6 years, I guess, and been in Santa Barbara since '83, in private practice since 1995. So looking forward to participating. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Dennis?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dennis Gordon. I'm a member of the Historic Landmarks Commission in Santa Barbara, and I am retired after a career in higher education, teaching courses in the history of architecture and design. And I'm very intrigued by the challenge of managing growth wisely here in Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Cass?
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm so happy to be a part of this group. I've lived in Santa Barbara for some 35 years and lived in a number of different neighborhoods over those years. I'm an artist. I'm also an architect and have a business here. Been practicing since as my own business since '96. I am a member of AIASB, and I am co-chair for advocacy with Detty Pikert and Ella Bilston, and work a lot with the city, and am pleased to be able to do that. I also serve on the county Central Board of Architectural Review. I'm a strong proponent for the arts in general, and for the art of architecture is very, very important to me. I worked on the objective design standards with Rosie and others from the city. And AIA advocated for the need of these standards that we will be working on. So very pleased that we're moving forward with that. And I also participated in several of the AIA charrettes to address our housing issues. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thanks, Cass. Okay, Gabe, you're next.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Gabe Escobedo. I am Vice Chair of the Planning Commission and very interested in this project. I was keeping up with the objective design standards that had been done previously, and really looking forward to being a part of this work group. This is going to be a tremendous work effort, and I'm looking forward to being here with you all. Thank you.
Okay, Robert Dooley.
Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. My name is Robert Dooley. I am a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. I practice in the public realm as the county architect with a strong background in historic preservation and the Department of Interior Standards, and enjoy my time on the HLC doing that.
Great, and finally, Richard.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Richard Six. I'm currently Architecture Board of Review. Been practicing in, retired now for 7 years. Practiced architecture in Santa Barbara since 1980. And did quite a few stints on PR much 20 years ago, and things have changed, and very interested to see tools that the ABR can perform in the current context. Honored to be here.
Thank you. All right, so I wanted to mention before we kind of get into the rest of the presentation that this meeting, it's not as formal as a normal boards and commissions meeting, and we want to, as we go through this presentation, if you have questions or comments, please make sure, it might be easier if you just keep your cameras on and just wave, and we can call on you. So, we don't need to go through this really fast. We have until 11:30. And so with that, I'll go to the next slide and make sure if you want us to stop and spend more time, we'll do that as well. All right. So I'm going to keep this fairly brief, and there's multiple reasons for moving towards creating objective design standards. Some of which could be, the state is basically making us do this. We have our own policies in the city's general plan that calls for doing this. But I kind of wanted to just focus on, I see, some really overarching purpose of doing this. And, first of all, we all know we need to increase housing production in the city. And I see one way of doing this is to make the review process more predictable and efficient. So this is one way of doing this. And but we want to also ensure that the results still continue to give us the high quality housing projects that we've been seeing in our community. The recent AUD projects around the city have been beautiful, and a lot of them have got there because there's been a lot of push and pull between what was originally proposed and then how it went through design review. So so that's really the purpose of this project. We want to increase housing. We want it to be efficient and predictable, but we also want high quality design in our city that's in line with community expectations. Next slide, please. And I also thought, first of all, I want to thank you all for volunteering for this important project. I know you're all really busy, and this is going to take some time. It's going to be challenging. But it's also going to be really interesting, and people are going to have different opinions on things, but that'll be the challenge for staff and for our consultant team to pull it all together. So thank you. And your role is going to be, you're the subject matter experts, and we're going to look to you to help us. How are we going to use and apply design standards for apartments and condominiums in our city and mixed use projects? We're going to look to you to provide input on the process of reviewing new projects that incorporate design standards. Of course, we're going to ask you to comment on and provide your subject matter expert input on all the draft materials that staff and Opticos produce for you. And we'd also like to make sure you provide project updates to your fellow board, commission, and AIA members. As we move along in this process, we want to make sure all those folks know how this is going. And that way, when we get to the end, when we're doing the more formal hearings in front of Architectural Board of Review, Historic Landmarks Commission, Planning Commission, and ultimately City Council, everyone's been aware of what's going on, and hopefully towards the end it'll go more smoothly when you've been providing those regular project updates. Does anyone have any questions on this before I move on? All right, looks not. So next slide, please. So I have a couple of slides to go over the project and schedule in a little bit more detail. And, this schedule reflects some of the key dates and milestones that were envisioned from Opticos when we started the kickoff. you know, there's always going to be a few delays and some changes as we go through the project organically. But starting with from now until about November, we do expect to have 2 of these work group meetings. And, you know, we'll be starting the public engagement process, which will include, I'll describe a little bit better, these focus group interviews. Opticos is also putting out throughout the whole project videos at particular times that'll be available for anyone to look at. And they're starting on research at this point from about August to November. Next slide. Then getting into late this year and about to the mid next year, a couple more work group meetings. Again, you'll see on this slide some videos that'll come out at very particular times in the process. And this will be when Opticos is going to be working really hard with us on coming up with the draft design standards. Up until it looks like we have about June when those will come out. And next slide. And then we have from about mid 2022 to 2023 more public engagement and starting to get into that process of finalizing the public review draft and getting ready for public hearings. This is a grant-funded project, so we do sort of have a hard ending date of mid 2023. So that hearing process will sort of start late 2022 and go over the course of a few months. Does anyone have any questions about the overall project schedule?
Rosie, are you going to be able to share this?
Oh, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Still can't hear you.
I can hear you, Gabe.
Not sure.
I can hear you, Gabe.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear him.
I can.
it might be Rosie's headphones.
Sorry, for some reason I can't hear anyone. I don't know what's going on.
Now we can talk about her.
Check something here.
Right.
Huh. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment and find out why I can't hear anyone. I'll be right back.
Do 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 do.
Sorry about that. I took off my headphones. Can someone speak now and I'll see if I can hear them?
Can you?
Yes, I can hear everyone now. I don't know what happened, but okay, we'll move on. Any questions on the project and schedule?
My only question was, would you be able to share this timeline with us?
Yes.
After the meeting?
Okay. Yep, I'll be happy to do that.
Rosie, just a housekeeping thing. Just now that you took your headphones off, you need to speak a little louder because it's not picking up your voice as much.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is this a little better?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on the project and schedule? Okay, next slide, please. All right, so focus group interviews. This is following this work group meeting towards the end of the month. Opticos is planning to conduct a series of small focus group interviews of folks that, you know, they were calling the frequent flyers, or the people who, you know, would be most often actually using objective design standards. So we're setting up time for them to talk to some of our affordable housing advocates, architects and landscape architects of, you know, some of the more recent projects that have been going through the system, developers and applicants, some of the people who advocate for historic resources, and community members. So we're still in the process of setting those up, but that's sort of the next milestone in this effort. And next slide. And also next week, Opticos is actually coming here in person to do a site tour, and we're going to be looking at, of course, some of our recently constructed apartments and condominiums of various sizes and styles all throughout the city, you know, and some of our existing iconic buildings and some proposed project sites. For logistical reasons, we have to keep the participant numbers small, but I will send you this map, and there's a whole description that goes along with all the points on the map. And I would really encourage you to do this site tour on your own as well. So I'll do that after this meeting. And then this would not be the only time Opticos will be here in person to do research and such. So we hope in the future there'd be some opportunities when we can maybe these work group meetings will finally be in person, or there'll be further research tours and things like that. So any questions on this before I move on? And like I said, right after this meeting, I can share with you where we're going in case you have any questions or comments on that. Mr. Uli.
Of the dots on the map and the 1 or 2 page blurb that you're going to provide for each location, are you indicating if any of them are historic resources?
No, but I will. That's a really good point.
Thanks.
I will do that. We did put on the map some of the potential historic districts, but yeah, that's a great point. Anyone else? Okay, so now I'm going to hand over the rest of the presentation to Stefan.
Rosie,
oh, yes.
Cass has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cass, missed that.
Oh, that's okay. Will the tour involve going through some of these other neighborhoods like the Bungalow District, the Funk Zone, you know, any of these other areas? Will that be included?
So the tour touches on the edge of the Bungalow District. I think it's a little hard to see on this map, but we are going through that area. The Funk Zone I did not choose as an area to go through, and actually the whole coastal zone, because the AUD program, or what will be changing to the multi-unit housing standards, has not been certified by the Coastal Commission yet. There's a whole area of the city that is not taking advantage of the incentives and the density increases that the rest of the city is offered, although that hopefully will be the case in the future. But I think if we have time, we are driving through the coastal zone and we're going to be having lunch in that area. So, and I think Opticos staff probably have some time to explore the Funk Zone on their own as well.
Just so that it, you know, the unique characters of some of these other neighborhoods becomes more apparent.
Yeah, that's good input, and I'll make sure we'll talk about the Funk Zone and encourage them to go see it on their own, but we may not have time to specifically go there on this visit.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, Stefan, you can take it away.
Thanks, Rosie. So we just have a few slides to go through here. I want to start by just sort of providing an overview of the work group meetings that we are expecting. And we have 6 described in our work scope. And as Rosie mentioned, we would like to do the first 2 to 3 before the end of the year. We are just starting the project now, so we're sort of at the beginning of our sort of learning phase of the project. As Rosie mentioned, we'll be coming down to Santa Barbara next week and then initiating a series of stakeholder interviews. Those are going to inform an existing conditions study that we're going to do, and we'd like to come back with you with our preliminary findings from that for meeting 2. We're going to be spending some time looking at the underlying conditions in the zones where objective design standards would apply. We start to sort of understand what the sort of dimensional characteristics are And we also start to understand where there are sort of limiting factors or deviations between sort of built environments and what the zoning standards might currently be suggesting. So we'll be bringing that to you in meeting 2. In meeting 3, we're going to sort of put together what we refer to as a framework approach, which is a way to think about how to apply objective design standards in the city, as well as the extent and nature of those standards. And this sort of will relate to some of the things that we're going to start to introduce to you actually today. And then we anticipate bringing the draft design standards to you actually in 2 chunks. The first one is specific to building types and architecture. And we understand from staff that those are sort of high priority items that we're sort of all interested in discussing. The second piece would be sort of a more sort of general to all component, where we sort of look at supplemental standards and general standards that are applicable everywhere. And then on meeting 6, we'll actually be discussing the workbook. This is sort of a piece of our deliverable that starts to sort of describe how the objective design standards are expected to work and sort of what their outcomes will be. So we look forward to sort of engaging with you actually sort of in the next sort of 9 months as these sort of meetings unfold. You go to the next slide, please, Rosie. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time today. Oh, I'm sorry, Richard, I see your hand raised. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, on these last meetings where we'll be discussing the workbook, we'll have opportunities to see the work prior to the meetings so we can prepare.
Yeah, Rosie, do you want to sort of talk a little bit about sort of what the protocol will be for how we sort of share content with the work group prior to the actual meeting is held?
Yeah, we would definitely want to provide you time, to look at whatever draft materials we have prior to these meetings. I think a good goal would be to get you draft materials, I don't know, a week or 2 before any work group meeting, so you have plenty of time to read through them and comment. So we'll make sure we work that into the schedule. And my understanding is, as well, with the videos that go with these, some of the videos will come out after our work group meetings, but in other cases, we hope to have the video first for you to view as well, and that might spark some questions and conversations and things like that. So yeah, we would want to get you draft materials in plenty of time so you have time to review them before the meetings.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Rosie, I think you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I want to spend sort of a few minutes just providing sort of a more general overview of objective design standards. And one of the points that I want to convey here is that cities that we work with, they sort of fall in different places across the spectrum when they are making determinations about how far they want the regulations to go. And what we find is that these things are sort of very particular, and they sort of have to do with traditions for design review, understanding a sort of accommodation of discretionary review, and just sort of understanding sort of the kinds of things that cities are comfortable regulating. So we're going to talk about sort of a range of objective design standards across a spectrum. And the divisions that I sort of will provide when I talk about the difference between basic and moderate and high are actually somewhat arbitrary at this point. But we sort of want to kind of give this out to you as sort of a way to say, this is a way to start thinking about how we want to approach the objective design standards and how much we want to regulate. And of course, we asked this question in the context of, you have a lot of documents and guiding and guidelines today that actually are, sometimes they actually may be used in an objective way, but they are sort of not regulatory. And we'll be asking questions as we sort of move forward through the process about taking a lot of those things that now exist as guidelines and seeing if how they actually might sort of adjust and become more sort of objective standards. But all of those things sort of tie back to this big question about sort of the level of acceptable regulation. And this is sort of what I'd like to sort of take you through today. You go to the next slide, please, Rosie. So I want to start with just sort of talking about sort of what we sort of think about when we think about sort of a basic level of objective design standards. And these are really standards that are working to sort of communicate the zoning envelope, the allowed zoning envelope on sort of a given parcel or parcels. And so we think about sort of ways that we regulate building height, building setbacks, ways that we start to genuinely articulate the massing in terms of how, if the profile is constant as it sort of meets the setbacks, or if there are sort of requirements for setbacks as we sort of shift to upper floors, for example. And at this stage, we often are starting to think about general ways to articulate the massing and composition of that zoning envelope, but we are silent on more of the details. So we might sort of think about sort of horizontal and vertical facade articulation, but at this stage, we are typically silent about architectural style or sort of the regulation of additional elements that actually bring additional detail to that zoning envelope. And this is sort of a good starting point. I think cities that we work with that actually are looking for sort of a real basic palette of objective design standards, they tend to kind of focus on these elements and then they sort of stop. And so I'm going to sort of take you through sort of the next series in the next slide, which is sort of thinking about an added layer of standards that start to provide further articulation for that zoning envelope. These two things, I often use this analogy, is that when we at Opticos sort of think about zoning as what we're doing to define the potato in the sort of Mr. Potato Head toy that we sort of all are familiar with and sort of all sort of grew up with. When we talk about zoning envelope, we're trying to sort of figure out how to define the potato. And then when we talk about sort of architectural details and supplemental standards, we're trying to sort of understand and figure out what we actually apply to that potato to actually make the architecture and to sort of articulate different kinds of architectural styles. So when we sort of talk about the basic and the moderate level, we're still in that kind of potato realm. One of these days I'm going to find a better analogy for this, but please stay with me sort of for this as we start to just take you through this. At this moderate level, we start to spend more time actually articulating what we refer to as sort of the main body of a building. And we start to think about the articulation of that zoning envelope as a primary mass and think about ways that it actually might grow and extend from that mass through a series of wings. And those actually might be wings that are sort of a smaller mass that actually extend out from that main body to the sides. They may extend to the front or to the rear. This is sort of particularly important in places like Santa Barbara, where there is sort of a high degree of articulation that we see in the massing and in how buildings actually shape the zoning envelope on parcels, but also sort of how they actually may meet the street. It's a very sort of, it's often sort of a subtle and sort of well-articulated strategy. So we sort of want to think about that. And this is also particularly important when we're thinking about introducing new buildings into environments where the footprint of buildings is such a prevalent condition that is actually driving the character of a place. And so you can think about sort of the many of the neighborhoods where the buildings actually do not reach sort of the zero lot line condition at the side, rear, and front of the parcels, but that the character of the neighborhoods is actually being driven by this sort of repeated patterns of main bodies on the parcels that are actually grown through the articulation of these secondary wings. And then we sort of get to kind of the more sort of detailed layer. And if you go to the next slide, Rosie, I'll talk a little bit about that. So at this sort of high level, we actually start to articulate much more in terms of the details that are actually sort of making up those architectural sort of compositions. So we might spend more attention sort of to how sort of the roof forms may actually sort of participate or contribute to a building design. And we actually also start to sort of apply architectural styles and actually how those can relate to some of the different massing compositions that the zoning can support. And you have sort of a lot of sort of history and documentation of architectural styles. There are sort of differences when we can think about sort of how we treat the eaves of buildings and the roof forms, how we treat the openings with regards to windows and doors, how we treat sort of external elements, things like balconies, porches, and other elements that actually might sort of protrude from sort of a building mass. And also even down to sort of how we think about materials and colors. And those are things that we typically see cities who are actually looking for sort of very high level of regulation will actually ask us to sort of take us down to sort of that level of the detail, particularly with the idea that we can get a positive outcome in the absence of discretionary review, or where discretionary review through some situations may actually need to be limited. And so that's sort of the third layer that we get to, but we find that some cities simply just don't have a tradition or an interest in regulating this concept of architectural style. And so it's not something that we sort of always sort of find is an appropriate strategy that should be articulated through objective design standards. So that sort of provides kind of a spectrum of sort of how we sort of think about these standards, from sort of basic to moderate to high. This is sort of a preliminary sort of thought about sort of how we can sort of think about this, and how we sort of ask this question about what level of regulation actually might be appropriate. And I think I have one more slide, Rosie, slide 16, is that correct? Yeah, and so I want to sort of just underline that the divisions that I sort of described in these slides, it is somewhat arbitrary. And so what we sort of want to actually find is sort of the right approach that sort of works for the city. And that has to do with not only sort of what you're comfortable regulating, but also sort of how you sort of want the discretionary process and your review process to relate to those regulations, and where you sort of want to draw the line between what's controlled and what is actually still might be open to discussion, understanding that we are sort of in this new realm now where particularly on sort of on some projects, discretionary review is limited, or actually is not able to be included in the process. So this is sort of an important thing for us to sort of start thinking about at this phase. Thanks, Rosie.
So thank you, Stefan. So we still have plenty of time in this introductory meeting. So this would be a good time to ask questions from the work group members about the three approaches or combos or anything you want to comment on at this stage. Robert? I'll go, and then Richard after you.
Thank you. Just a broad brush general comment. Can this document that's shared in the slides be shared with the work group so we can kind of get familiar with the format, the layout, and what is talked about in them, so we can make sure we hit the ground running and not have to learn on Zoom?
Yes, I think I'll clarify with Stefan and Tony, but I think these graphics you're showing come from documents you've already produced for other cities. And are you asking, do you want to actually see the full document that Opticos produced for these other cities?
Yes.
Okay, is that something you could share, Stefan and Tony?
Yeah, we'd be happy to provide some resources for what is, what's been adopted and what's currently publicly available. Absolutely.
Great.
That's terrific, since they are public documents.
Okay, Richard, you had a.
Well, I don't know whether it's appropriate now, but it just occurs to me, looking at these different levels of design, standards, that one of the main purposes of the design standards is to have a basis for design control without the objective bodies limiting or being curtailed by the state and so forth for housing. But do we need the third level of high control of architecture? Don't the objective boards still able to comment and control the architectural standards, even if it is a multi-housing that would otherwise not be reviewed? Do you understand my question?
So Richard, I think what you're asking is, let me just make sure I understand this. So if we have,
so the process of review, we're going to be, the objective boards are going to be severely limited by the state and the new rules in regards to multi-housing. But do we still, does the process still involve our review and thus control over those finite architecture, high, the design details and so forth?
oh, okay, yeah, I get your question. So my understanding is that, as you know, like you said, the state is moving towards objective standards, but we still have, and the Housing Accountability Act has a limit on 5 hearings. So that sort of limits how many times projects can go back and forth once they're deemed complete. There still is a role for a Architectural Board and Review and Historic Landmarks Commission in these projects, and there is some ability as you're getting to the end of a project design to make some of these maybe more fine-tuned tweaks to it. So there is still a role. I just don't I haven't fully worked out, and we need to even, consult with the city attorney on how big that role will be and how that'll all work in the end. And Dan, it looks like, do you want to say something too?
Yeah, just briefly. So the city charter also mandates design review by ABR and HLC. So there will be some level of design review, and what that process is like hasn't been determined yet. And we would want to consult with this group on that as we proceed through this project.
So it's really the high level is to reduce uncertainty through the design review for developers and so forth, rather than being or rather than taking away our control of those final designs and so forth, the final design and details.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And I also see it as, hopefully when you do see the project for the first time, it's in a better shape than maybe as you're seeing projects now or in the last few years. We've worked out these standards enough that when it does get to you, there's not as much that you have to work with the applicant on, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks.
If I could say something, a couple of comments. I think this will be part of the learning curve for this group. When and in what situations objective design standards apply, because my understanding of the state legislation is not every single project will be covered by objective design standards. There have to be certain qualifications to be considered under that. But another comment that I would like to make is, I think one of the things that will be important for this group is to see that at the end of this process, we avoid conflicts between existing design guidelines, whether they're the historic resources or architectural review, conflicts between existing design guidelines and the new objective design guidelines. If we wind up with a conflict between the new objective and the existing, that's just creating a problem rather than solving a problem. So I think this is all part of the learning curve.
Rosie,
Yes, Cass.
I have a question. And I apologize. I'm just, kind of, as we all kind of come into this and are trying to grapple with the big picture, what exactly it is that we are doing. I'd just like to say, we developed our objective design standards, the ones that we worked on for the past couple of years, and those apply to the entire city right now. And those standards, we have zoning that's already in place. So we, throughout the city, we're working, and the zoning is, I think, well described in other areas in our documents of the city, I believe. And we are currently working on our FAR and what the FARs will be in other areas, in everywhere, actually. And we have a consultant who is studying that presently, and we're waiting for their reply to see how well those are working, what their recommendations will be for all the various neighborhoods. So when we created the objective design standards that we currently have that apply to everywhere in the city, those standards were based upon Spanish colonial revival style, and they were based on downtown. So we were really thinking of the downtown when we were developing those standards, because we were concerned about projects coming in to the downtown under the SB 35. And we wanted to be sure we were covered, and we know that that's a very popular style. It's very important for our downtown and our El Pueblo Viejo. So that those standards were what we based it upon. And then we said, okay, this is great. Now we have these standards. So if anything comes in, we're covered. But we wanted to be sure, and this is what we talked about, was that we wanted to have other standards similar to that, is my understanding, for other neighborhoods, so that so say it was the bungalow district. We want to preserve, I believe, the specialness of downtown by having the Spanish colonial revival preserved there and in our historic area. But if we start having Spanish colonial revival everywhere, it can start to erode the specialness of the downtown, I believe. So we were saying, well, don't we need to have standards for, say, other areas that would then preserve the unique character of those neighborhoods? Like, I'll use the example of the bungalow district, where we see other kinds of styles. We see, a shingle style, craftsman style, other styles besides Spanish. And so maybe I've got this completely wrong, but I thought we were going to be developing different standards for those different neighborhoods. So if you were going to develop in, say, the funk zone, these standards would say, in the funk zone, you can do any of these styles, and you'd have an example of each one of these styles, something more contemporary, maybe something more industrial down there. But that we wouldn't be reinventing the zoning, because the zoning is already created. So I guess I'm just, that was kind of what my preconceived notion was, and of what we were doing, was trying to create standards, several, and that's why I asked the question earlier whether or not tours would be happening for our other neighborhoods where we have, different kinds of styles than what we have downtown. Does that make any sense at all, or am I just?
I'll start to answer this and I'll let other people go in. So you're correct. I mean, I remember very well that when we started with Senate Bill 35, we picked Spanish colonial revival because it's sort of the default style in the city. And we talked a lot about we can't just do this. There has to be other styles. So we're still in the, and that's the intent we went in with our, request for proposals and viewing how we would move to the next phase is, yeah, we need similar standards, but that'll cover different styles. There are some neighborhoods in the city though that are really eclectic, so it'll be challenging to figure out what style works in this particular neighborhood. But putting that aside, we're still moving in that direction, but we're in the early phases now of trying to figure out, as Opticos presented, there's different ways to go about doing this. And so we haven't settled exactly how this is all going to mesh together and work. But in my mind, the intent is to still have architectural style standards that help define a certain style and what are those elements that make a building craftsman or semi-Victorian or contemporary or whatever it is. So I'll let anyone else chime in.
And one last thing too, back to Mr. Dordan's comments that we want to have, we're trying to simplify. We would like to not make things more complicated than they already are. We want to make it so that it is a simplified process. So if you're doing something in one of these neighborhoods, you can know that you may use any of these styles, and you list them out. Say you can have Spanish colonial revival, you can have craftsman, you can have Pueblo, whatever all the styles are that are allowed in that neighborhood, you could just simply list them and have examples of what those are. And then if somebody wants to go rogue and do something else, then they would go through the full design process at that point. But with the objective design standards, they would be, have a easier go of it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Want to hear what others have to say. Yeah.
Hey, Robert?
As others have commented, it becomes apparent that this will be a challenging path to navigate. It seems to me that using the example of the graphic on the screen, there are two things. One, the objective design standards seek to form a box that then a skin can be put onto. And the design review boards are concerned about the skin primarily. But I see a couple of challenges. The K dimension and the M dimension and the O dimension and the N dimension, may not work with Spanish colonial revival, may not work with Victorian, may not work for Pueblo or any of the other styles once it's defined, because architecture is not skin deep. Architecture is the entire building inside and out. And if the proportions and scale and shape and massing of the building is controlled by the standards, I can see there's a rub there about how to apply the skin. So I would hope that as these standards and the shapes and sizes are articulated, that to Cass's point, we already have statements of styles. There's a whole chapter of them. Pretty much every single one has been articulated. That somehow all of that is folded into the menu of options that allow this box, depending on the style of architecture selected by the client and the design team, can fit within the standard. Because as Commissioner Dordan said, there's going to be a rub there if there's a conflict between one or the other, and we would have missed our, I think, opportunity in broader goal.
Dennis, did you want to say something? I saw your microphone on.
No,
Okay.
I'm fine.
Well, like we said, this is going to be challenging. But I trust that you're all the experts and we'll get there. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Because we're kind of, the last bits are just determining our next meeting date and public comment, but I don't think we have any members of the public. So now's your chance to kind of tell us what you think.
Rosie, just to follow up on the documents, when would you anticipate that this group would get those documents?
Can I ask Opticos to help me with that one?
Yeah, Rosie, we can provide those via link early next week.
So Rosie, I won't be here on the 16th, unfortunately. I have a family commitment. Will there be any, your meeting with the design review boards, will there be recordings of that and so forth so I can review?
Richard, I'm not sure what you mean. The 16th of
This September, Opticos is coming down.
Oh,
correct?
okay, yeah, that's the site visit. So we didn't intend that you would be attending that.
But
That's
in the afternoon, you have some dealings with the review boards?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. No, there are interviews in the afternoon that Opticos is holding with the chair of the HLC with Anthony and with the chair of the ABR with Kevin. Mainly because they're not on the work group, and we just thought it was a good opportunity for them to sit down and talk to them for like half hour. So that's similar to those focus group interviews. It's just since they're in town, they'll be meeting with Kevin and Anthony and chatting with them. Yeah, so don't worry about that. Actually, Timmy, if you can go to the slides. So we do want to identify when we're meeting next. And I tentatively selected November 19th. It's another Friday. I think this time 10 to 11:30 works well for everyone. And it's a Friday that the city is open. So hopefully that works for you all at this point. I know it's a little bit far ahead. Does anyone right away know if they'll not be here on that date?
I will not be here on that date, but don't let that stop. If it works for everybody else, it works, but I will not be here.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know too, we do record these meetings. So if anyone misses a meeting, we'll be able to share it with you later. Okay, and then I believe that meeting was existing conditions. So in the meantime, you'll have the materials that Opticos will provide of where they've done work in other cities to review. We'll have the site tour and the description of the projects we're looking at if you're interested in that. Is there anything else you'd like to research or hear about before we meet next? Any information you need from me or our team? Robert?
Thank you. I would suggest, Rosie, if you have proposed dates in the future, the 19th works for me except for the afternoon. If you have proposed dates, that you send them out as a calendar invite so that they get on our calendar and don't get booked by somebody else. That far out, I think, tends to work. So it's helpful to get on the calendar first.
Okay, I can do that. Let's see. Is there anything else at this point from the work group? We're happy to share any materials you want to see.
that'll help you in this process.
Rosie, you know, a whole month, I don't know, and a half between meetings. Will you be establishing, you'll be working a lot more frequently with Opticos in regards to your process between these meetings? Will there be any published minutes and so forth that we can keep abreast so we're not, you know, so far apart and having just frequent, infrequent input?
Yes, Richard. So we do, I'm doing regular sort of project management meetings with Opticos, and we do take minutes of those. A lot of what we talk about may not be interesting to you, but it is something we could share if you want to see what we're talking about. Also, if we, certain data points that we share with Opticos may be interesting to the work group as well. So when I, maps and things like that we're working on, I'm happy to share with you. I can always just try to send out maybe semi-regular emails and let you know where we're at, because you're right, there is a long time between work group meetings. So I'd be happy to check in every once in a while, let you know what materials are available. If there's, you know, public drafts of things we can share with you, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, whatever you think is appropriate, so you know we can keep perhaps better in the loop than just, you know, once a month and a half.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I saw Robert and then Cass.
I might suggest something like a Google Drive or something that whenever it's updated, we get an email and we can go out and read whatever the minute is or whatever. And that saves you from having to, oh, I've got to send them an email. You know, just let the computer do the work, and hopefully our consultant has some ability to use technology to do that for us.
Yes, we do. There's just, we're a bit limited in the city in what sort of outside products we can use. So I'll have to check and see as a city staff person what we can share, because they have a lot of concerns about security and things like that. So I'll find that out. And Cass?
Yeah, I was just, you know, I'd be really interested to hear, you know, all of these meetings, the focus group interviews that are with a number of groups, of course, that we have, you know, cross pollination with all of these people. So very happy to see that happening, and wondering, you know, would like to hear what kind of feedback that you're getting from these different groups. So I don't know if there's any way of that to happen, or how you would suggest, you know, just being more up to speed with everything so that we're all, you know, learning together, and not having to repeat. I just think that would be helpful.
Yes, I think that's also a great idea. And Tony, can you maybe share what would be the best way of, as you've conducted these interviews or you've taken notes, would you be willing to share those with the work group, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, we can add that to the shared Google document that the rest of the information would go on.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Just by the way, to Commissioner Cooley's comment as well, you know, we are very used to working in the public realm or public arena. Most of our work is for public clients, cities and public clients, and so it's really about your level of interaction that you want and how you want that to occur, and we are very accustomed to doing that and working in that way. So if you want things to be accessible to everyone, we're very accustomed to doing that. So we aren't coming forward with that, you know, you don't hear it coming out from us right away, because we're trying to understand how you want to work. So this is great to hear. Yeah, we definitely respond.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? These are all really great to hear. And I agree with Tony, you know, we're sort of just getting started. This process is different from the Senate Bill 35 process. It was under a sort of get it done quickly mode, and the meetings were not open to the public. So this is different now, and we do want to share as much with you as we can and get some really meaningful input. So, you know, and also feel free anytime to email me, ask me what's going on. In fact, I'll share after this, we have a web page set up for this project. It still needs, you know, we're hope to improve it as we go along. I really want to get more public members interested in these meetings as well, and any suggestions to get the notices out to your constituencies, or you know, I think in hindsight I could have put a notice in the AIA newsletter that this meeting was occurring. For future meetings we can do that. So yeah, I'm open to however you want to participate and get the word out that these are going on. Would be great.
That's awesome, Rosie. You know, I know you work with Tara Rizzi, our executive director. So, you know, that would be great. I know there'll be a lot of our members who will want to, you know, be watching and knowing about what's happening here. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and as what's shown on this slide, we set up, it's almost like a special email box, SBDS, Santa Barbara Design Standards at santabarbaraca.gov. So those, I monitor that box, and it's meant for anyone really to ask questions, or, and you can also, you all have my work email as well. So either one works. The web page is here. It's a very long string of items there, but I can send you a shortcut to the web page. I also, similar to other projects we have in the city, we have a email notification system, but people need to sign up to be notified by email. And so that way they get a notice, hey, a meeting's occurring, there's a public draft item to be reviewed, there's a public hearing coming up. I send a notice out to, you know, we have hundreds of people that are in the land development team email and the average unit size density incentive email, and encourage them to sign up for this project's email, but I only got about 20 signups. So any way you can think of to get the word out that they should sign up so they can be notified, that would be great too. And I can, I'll send you all an email that tells people how to do this, if that helps.
Great, and we will be, you know, our advocacy, AIASB advocacy, we meet every other week. So this will be an item that will be on our agenda that we can share. And normally, of course, Dedi would be here as well. So between the two of us, we can share that information with our committee.
That would be great. And if you ever need us to come talk to your group as well, if you want to update straight from me or Tony or Stefan, let us know.
Great, great, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and any ideas to engage the greater public, I would encourage as well. It's a little hard to get community members involved in a project that's somewhat specialized like this, but you know, we don't want this to be a surprise to community members that we're working on this and suddenly they're like, what is the city doing? So, Tony?
Yeah, Rosie, I have a question for the group. You know, as we begin to work together, you know, it's really interesting to hear people's backgrounds and where they're coming from. But I think a question on my mind right now, having done this a lot for different cities, is if we hadn't shown you any of the examples and shown you the spectrum of experience that we have and needs that we've seen across the state in our work, it would be great to hear from each of you how you would frame the question of what are you expecting of these standards? there's a lot of things that we need to do and take into account and consider for sure, and especially in a place as architecturally rich and diverse as Santa Barbara. But I think it'd be great to hear from each of you. We have 20 minutes left in this call, and we're at the end of the agenda. It would be great to hear from each of you. You know, if you got to talk today about, here's what I think that these standards should do, that even a framework of what that is, it'd be great to hear your perspectives on that. If you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Who wants to go first? Robert.
If I can get my mouse up to the mute button. Well, Tony, that is a great question. And oftentimes the challenge in Santa Barbara, as you can imagine. My expectation is that these guidelines should not prevent someone from being creative to create architecture on their property. These standards should not be a roadblock for someone to express a Spanish colonial revival or Victorian or any other style, contemporary, or as Cass indicated, going rogue and just doing something completely unique. So my expectation is that this is not a roadblock, but an aid and a guide to city staff and review bodies to frame what the architecture should be and not prevent it.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. And first of all, I'll second what Mr. Uli just said about not preventing creativity. I think that's important. My own 2 cents is a little bit more speculative in nature. Standards create a framework, and I'd like to see that framework, if we can use it to visualize the future of the city as a whole, not just what happens on one particular block, but could we use it to model what Santa Barbara might look like in 2050 under different scenarios, using the kinds of numbers, the RHNA numbers that the state of California is sending out. I think it would be a great help to public discussion if we could come up, if these could in some way help us visualize a future, literally visualize.
Okay, anyone ready to go next?
Being in the middle of the the process at the ABR, you know, I feel that these standards should, you know, be a tool and assistance, you know, get streamline the expectations between the board and the public and the client. Great architecture, especially if the is going to be reduced by, you know, the state or the process upcoming of the new rules. So I think you know, it needs to be a tool that we can all use to streamline the process.
Okay, is anyone else?
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? Richard, thank you for that. And thank you, by the way, Commissioner Cooley and Commissioner Dordan also. But Richard, I just want to dig into that. The law already requires that it be streamlined. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by streamlining?
Well, you know, when we've had a lot of trouble with particular styles to know, you know, what's expected and what's quality and what isn't. I think if applicant to the with being educated and guided by the standards prior to our review, I think that is a tremendous step forward and would expedite and streamline the process that we go through with them. We've had projects that sit there, and have difficulty communicating or getting across ideas, or how to express that particular architecture with, it can be, we have one project that I think we had 14 meetings where we were just log jammed with how to communicate and get the design right, and because it was an extremely big project and nobody had the tools or the way to communicate how to reduce the apparent mass, bulk, and scale of the project. So I think that's what I mean by having a tool to streamline and prevent the log jam.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Are there specific styles that have been more challenging when you go through the review process than others? And if so, what are those specific styles?
I think that a lot of the the types of projects that we're considering, the large multi-housing AUD projects, are at least 1 to 2 stories more in height than the surrounding types of buildings. They usually are merging lots, so the width of the block that it takes up is much than the existing smaller parcels. So the typical solution that we see is this kind of modern style, where it's very boxy, contemporary, flat roofs, and so forth. And it's very difficult to have an architect, there's not a lot of rules with the modern contemporary style to guide or to make these masses more interesting and follow the quality of the design in Santa Barbara. I hope I answered the question. So I think primarily the modern contemporary style is one of the most difficult and more common ones that these larger projects choose because of the advantageousness of getting more mass and more height out of that particular.
And Gabe, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you. And I would echo many of the statements that have been made. I think for me as well, I'm hoping that this takes out some of the I know this is going to sound bad, but if you just stick with me for a little bit, I'll get to the point, is takes out some of the discretion of the process and makes it a more predictable process. And I think it's going to be really important that we put a lot of, and obviously we're all dedicated, we're going to put in a lot of work on these objective design standards, but the discretion that has already been taken out of the process by state law, we're only going to see more of that happening. And so we're going to get less and less opportunity to
I think his screen froze. Does that happen to everyone else?
Yes, it did.
Yes.
Okay.
Gabe, you're frozen.
Can you hear us?
I don't know. I'm not sure if there's much we can do about that. Maybe I can ask him to follow up in writing.
Or maybe he'll come back on.
Yeah. Well, we've got just a couple more minutes, and I don't want, if you feel a little put on the spot, you can also consider this a homework assignment and put it in writing as well. But does anyone else want to weigh in?
I guess I spoke quite a bit before, but since the question was asked, I know we're trying to get our arms around it, but it'd be, you know, just kind of understanding a little bit more clearly. I agree with much of what others have said. I think it needs to be a simple tool, and that it illustrates the typical details of styles that are acceptable. I know when we did the objective design standards, it's very helpful to say what is not acceptable, and then to leave it open for other things, because we want to have design creativity. We want artistry. We want, you know, the designers to be able to, you know, fully express, so that we have a variety in our city, and which is what Santa Barbara has always been, is a very artistic, expressive. So I would like to see, you know, what of the styles that are acceptable, then just show what, you know, typical details of those styles, but let the designer pick and choose how to put it all together and make it be a beautiful thing. I think it should not be duplicative. This is where I was getting into kind of the zoning versus the design review. The zoning is set in these areas, so that's a different animal in my opinion, and that the design review is, you know, what we're talking about here, so that we're not duplicating work that we already have in the city. And then just that this should really help us to emphasize and enhance our unique existing neighborhoods. That's the whole idea, so that you go to different areas and you can tell you're in a different area. This is a unique place. So, you know, the funk zone can get more funky, and it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, I think we can say that perhaps, you know, the Spanish style is okay anywhere. That would be acceptable anywhere. But we want to be sure that we're also recognizing the uniqueness of these other neighborhoods, and really helping in us with this simple tool. So that's what I would have to say right now.
And it looks like Gabe, you were able to come back. Do you remember where you left off?
Yeah, I hope so. Can you hear me? My computer would restart right in the middle of my comments. Thank you. Sorry about that. But the larger point I was getting at is, what I'm hoping is that what we create here is going to withstand further requirements from the state, and it protects that if we do a good enough job, it's going to protect what we all love about Santa Barbara. And I love what Cass just mentioned. What I caught at the end is I think 100% right is, in my opinion, we have some really talented architects in the city, and I think that they all really want to contribute to the fabric of what is Santa Barbara architecture. And I think if we provide them a framework and clue them into the things that we're looking for, I have every faith that they're going to execute on that, and that we can trust them to be good stewards of our city and our architecture. So I think sometimes it's viewed contentiously, our expectations in architects, and I trust the talent that we have working in this city. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a more objective process that allows for that flexibility for our artists to be artists. And that's what I see our architects as.
That was really well put. I like that. Okay, and if you have further thoughts, you know, like I said, feel free to email anytime, and we'll I'd be happy to share them with Opticos too. So, well, it looks like we've pretty much come to the end. We have 3 minutes. Anyone else want to say anything before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none, I thank you so much.
I'll just say thank you to everybody. Thank you all. I look forward to, you know, many discussions and moving forward, and thank you all very, very much.
Great. Okay, we'll be in touch.
All right,
Take
thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Bye.